Part 1. The Journey of Grief. Talking about sorrow is like catching a jellyfish bare-handed. It is rigid words grasping at amorphous reality, the fullness of it squirting through my fingers, as I get repeatedly stung in the process. Even if, with words, I manage to pin it to a few of these pages, the dried-out husk left behind fails to express the creature swimming in my gut. There are various biblical images of grief. It is a sleepless groaning, a twisting of the stomach, a swollen tongue that chokes the mouth, and a drunken bender of the heart. It pierces us with arrows. It dissolves our bones, leaving us slumping bags of flesh. As I seek to wrap language around sorrow in these pages, understand that no one is more aware than I of the limitations of such an endeavor. To truly name a thing is to comprehend it, to have a sort of power over it. Grief is the ultimate powerlessness. The man who pretends to control it will be quickly proved a liar. Yet though I cannot truly name the thing, I hope to gesture in its direction. What we are discussing is a journey. I cannot capture every painful vista in these pages. I certainly cannot give shortcuts or clear directions. What I can do is describe the landmarks of sorrow, the vistas and valleys I have experienced along the way. Perhaps, as a fellow traveler, some of it will look familiar. And together, we can learn that we are not alone. Chapter 1. Confronting Suffering. God first kicked us in the teeth 7 years ago. I was finishing seminary. My wife, Elizabeth, and I were expecting our first child. We went to the OB/GYN for a routine visit. Moments after entering the room, the doctor hurried out with a worried look. He returned a few minutes later and told us that Elizabeth was about to give birth. We needed to get to a hospital as soon as possible. She was 27 weeks pregnant, on the cusp of her 3rd trimester. A numbness took hold as those words seeped into my brain. Careening along the shoulder of the highway past rush-hour traffic, I felt detached. I was an observer, sitting outside my body. We staggered into the emergency room. I gave a matter-of-fact explanation to the tired nurse behind the glass. Unable to halt the labor, they transferred her to another hospital. I followed the ambulance, still in a daze. I remember our daughter's birth in vivid moments. Doctors arguing with surgeons. Hymns I softly sang. Her scream as she was born, tiny and gray. My joyful sob, because that feeble cry meant our daughter's lungs were at least developed enough to hold air. Then the numbness returned. For the first time in my life, I was confronted by mortality and the terror and sorrow that accompanies it. We didn't know if our daughter would survive. Her beating heart was visible through gossamer skin. Some moments as she lay in the NICU, it paused, forgetting to pump, and we would shake and cajole her back to life. We watched her, in a sense, die and be reborn again and again. In seminary, they make you give practice sermons to fellow students. Like most young men studying for ministry, I was far too confident of my prowess. I had chosen, a week before our daughter's birth, to preach on Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac. It seemed poignant and courageous when my wife was 5 months pregnant. Now, realizing that God may well be asking us to surrender our child in a literal sense, the story left me gutted. I felt the horror of those words. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. Genesis chapter 22, verse 10. Seeing my daughter laid out in her incubator, tangled in wires, I knew the fear and trembling that must have seized the patriarch. Numbness became my shelter as I confronted the specter of death. My emotions seemed too big, too incomprehensible to confront, so I shut down. I locked my heart behind steel blast doors, unassailable and unfeeling. In one way, it worked. The numbness helped me survive. It was only later, over the months we lived at the hospital, that I began to recognize it came with a cost.